You ever hear about a war that ended faster than most pizza deliveries?
Wait, what? That can't be real. Like an actual war?
Yeah, man, a real war. Not a battle, not a misunderstanding, a full-on declared war that lasted just 38 minutes.
38 minutes? That's not a war, that's a heated argument with extra paperwork.
Exactly. But the craziest part? It's officially recognized in history, the Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896. Shortest war ever recorded.
Zanzibar. That's off the coast of Africa, right? Near Tanzania?
Yeah, back then it was an island sultanate, really wealthy, connected to spice trade, ivory, all kinds of goods. It was kind of a prize location for European powers.
Oh, here we go. The European powers wanted everything era.
The golden age of colonizing everything that moved, yeah. So around this time, Britain had its hands all over the map. India, parts of Africa, you name it. Zanzibar was technically independent, but the British had heavy influence there.
Influence as in we're watching you, or influence as in we run your entire economy?
Pretty much the second one.
Figures.
Anyway, Zanzibar was ruled by a sultan, Hamad bin Thuwaini. He was friendly with the British. They liked him because he didn't stir things up. Everything was stable. For a while.
And then what happened?
July 1896, the Sultan dies. Suddenly.
Suddenly, huh? Like suspiciously suddenly?
Let's just say history is a little fuzzy on that one. There's no official "he was poisoned" note, but a lot of people back then thought something was off.
So, dude dies and everyone's like, that's odd. What happens next?
Well, the moment he dies, this guy named Khalid bin Barghash, his nephew, rushes into the palace, locks himself inside, and declares himself the new sultan.
No vote, no ceremony, no paperwork. Just, I live here now.
Pretty much. The problem, Britain had another guy they wanted as sultan, someone more cooperative. So when Khalid took the throne without their approval, Britain basically said, no, not going to happen.
Excuse me, sir. That's our throne you're sitting on.
Exactly. And remember, Britain had warships anchored right off the harbor, so this wasn't just political drama, it was a powder keg.
So let me get this straight. A guy takes over a palace, Britain doesn't like it, and they've got cannons just waiting outside.
Pretty much, yeah. The British consul sends Khalid a message, step down and leave the palace. Khalid ignores it.
Oh, no, he didn't.
Oh, he definitely did. Then he starts fortifying the palace. Sandbags, rifles, guards, the whole thing.
So this dude really thought he could hold off the British Navy from his house.
Yeah, and here's where it gets intense. The British gave him an ultimatum. They told him, you have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to step down or we'll open fire.
9 a.m. sharp. They even scheduled it. That's the most British thing ever.
Right? Like, imagine being told, we'll destroy your palace after breakfast.
I can just picture it. They probably had tea ready at 8:45.
But the thing is, it's not funny when you think about how fast it all escalated, because Khalid wasn't just some rebel. He had around 3,000 men with him and a small artillery force.
Okay, that's more than a few guards.
Yeah, but most of them were palace servants or civilians with weapons. Meanwhile, the British had warships armed with naval guns, including the HMS St. George. It wasn't a fair fight.
So basically, one side's got rifles, the other side's got battleships.
Exactly. The next morning, Khalid still refused to surrender, and when 9 hit, nothing happened.
Wait, they didn't attack?
Not yet. 2 minutes passed. At 9:02 a.m., the British admiral gave the order.
2 minutes late. Even their wars were punctual.
And that's when the shortest war in history officially began.
That must have been chaos, man.
Yeah. The British warships opened fire on the palace. Within minutes, the roof was collapsing. The Sultan's small artillery tried to respond, but their guns were outdated and most shots missed.
And the people inside?
Many didn't make it. The palace was made of wood and plaster. It caught fire almost instantly. The harbor filled with smoke. It wasn't a battle so much as a storm.
And this was all over who got to sit on a throne?
Yeah. a fight for power that ended up hurting people who had no say in it.
So, how long did it take before it was over?
38 minutes. By 9:40 a.m., the Sultan's flag was down, his palace destroyed, and his forces in chaos.
That's unreal.
It's one of those moments in history that sounds almost fictional, but it's all real. The British recorded everything, even the time it began and ended.
I can't believe that. Like in less than an hour, an entire government changed hands.
And what's wild is it wasn't just about Zanzibar. It was about showing what empire looked like. Speed, power, and no hesitation.
Yeah, a message that said, don't mess with us.
Pretty much. The shortest war in history wasn't about strategy, it was about control.
Still, 38 minutes. You blink and it's over.
And yet it changed everything for the people who lived through it.
Makes you think, man. Some wars drag for years. Some barely start, but both leave scars that last forever.
Yeah, and that's what makes this story worth remembering.
38 minutes, man.
Feels like the kind of story that reminds you history doesn't always need hours to make an impact.
Or to make a mess.
True. What's kind of crazy is how fast things got back to normal after it ended. Like, the palace is in ruins, people are still in shock, and Britain just walks in and says, all right, we're installing a new sultan.
Just like that. No negotiation, no trial, nothing?
Nope. Within the same day, literally hours after the palace fell, they picked Hamoud bin Mohammed, the guy they originally wanted. He was basically pro-British, and that's all that mattered to them.
So they replaced the guy who wouldn't listen with the guy who'd say yes, sir, to everything.
Exactly. That's how colonial politics worked back then. It wasn't about who was best for the people, it was who was best for the empire's schedule.
Yeah, as long as the trade routes were open and the taxes kept coming in.
That's the thing. Zanzibar wasn't just some random island. It was one of the biggest hubs for trade in East Africa. Spices, ivory, and sadly, it had a long history with the slave trade, too.
Right, I read about that. Like it was one of the last regions to still have slavery going on, even when most countries had banned it.
Yeah, and Britain used that as a moral card. They positioned themselves like they were ending slavery. And in some ways, they were, but at the same time, they were also making sure the island's economy fit their system.
So even the good part came with strings attached?
Always. Every empire likes to wear a halo while it's holding a stick.
Yeah, that's deep, like a slogan for history class.
Right? Empires, saving the world one occupation at a time.
It's wild, though. You think about the people living there, the shop owners, the kids running around the market, and they wake up one morning to cannon fire. By lunchtime, they've got a whole new ruler.
Yeah. There's something so surreal about that. Like, imagine sitting at breakfast, hearing explosions, and by afternoon, your flag's different.
And then what? They just went back to selling spices?
Sort of. The damage was bad. Hundreds injured or killed, the palace destroyed, ships sunk in the harbor. But Britain helped rebuild parts of it afterward, which is kind of ironic.
So they wrecked it, then showed up like, hey, need a hand fixing that?
Pretty much. It's that whole cycle. Destroy, rebuild, control.
That's what power looked like back then, huh? You didn't need to invade for years. You just had to make one loud example.
Yeah, and that's what the Anglo-Zanzibar War really was, a message. Not just to Zanzibar, but to anyone in the region thinking of defying Britain.
And people definitely got the message?
Oh yeah. After that, there wasn't another major uprising in Zanzibar for decades.
Man, 38 minutes. And it silenced the whole island for years. That's the kind of thing that tells you how fear works.
Fear and reputation. Britain didn't need a long war, they just needed everyone to see how fast they could win one.
You know what's ironic, though? The British ships took longer to clean up after the fight than the fight itself.
That's true. Some reports said it took them 2 days to clear the harbor and fix their ships.
2 days of cleanup for 38 minutes of victory.
Yeah, talk about an efficiency issue.
You think someone got in trouble for that? Like, Captain, next time try to keep the war under 20 minutes. We've got paperwork.
What's funny is you can laugh at the absurdity, but it's also this weirdly sad reflection of the time, how life, politics, and people were just chess pieces in bigger games.
Yeah, no kidding. And most people didn't even know it happened, right? Like, it's not one of those wars you hear about in school.
Exactly. You learned about World War I, World War II, but this one, barely a footnote, which is wild considering how strange it was.
Probably because it didn't last long enough to make a chapter.
Yeah, probably. Chapter 7, the war you could watch on your lunch break.
Bro, imagine if they had social media back then.
Oh yeah, breaking news. British Navy declares war at 9. By 9:40, peace restored. Hashtag shortest war ever.
And someone in the comments like, yo, I just tuned in. What did I miss?
But yeah, jokes aside, it's one of those stories that really shows how history isn't always grand battles or long struggles. Sometimes it's just fast, brutal, and over before you even realize what happened.
And the people who lived through it, they're the ones who carried it, even if no one else remembered.
Exactly. You look at those photos from the aftermath, locals standing in front of the wreckage, and you realize how fragile everything was.
Kind of reminds me of how fast things can flip, even today.
Yeah, power shifts, decisions made in rooms far away, and then regular people pay the price.
History's weird, man. It's like it keeps repeating, just with different tools.
And better clocks.
True.
What I like about stories like this one is they remind us that even the small moments matter. You know, if someone told you a war lasted under an hour, you'd laugh. But when you look deeper, it's about pride, power, and how quick destruction can happen when ego meets empire.
Yeah, 38 minutes, and they still called it victory. That says everything.
It really does.
You think people back home even cared?
Not really. In Britain, it was treated like a small incident. Newspapers gave it a few columns, mostly praising the Navy's discipline.
Yeah, discipline. That's one word for it.
It's strange how history filters things. What's tragedy in one place becomes a headline in another.
And that headline fades fast.
Yeah, but for the people there, it doesn't fade.
Makes you think, man. Like, what would the world remember if someone wrote it from the other side?
Probably everything we missed.
Yeah. The silences always say more than the noise.
You're getting poetic now.
Yeah, well, history does that to me.
Fair enough.
You know what I find crazy, Joe? The whole thing started because one guy wouldn't leave his palace.
Yeah, Sultan Khalid bin Barghash. Britain basically told him, hey, your uncle died, you're not supposed to be here, step aside. And he was like, nah, I'm the Sultan now.
So it was basically a royal version of, you can't tell me what to do.
Pretty much. But the stakes were higher than teenage rebellion. The British had treaties that said no new sultan could take power without their approval, which sounds ridiculous today, but back then, that was the deal.
Yeah, and he probably thought, it's my country, I'll rule if I want. That's pride, but also that's sovereignty.
Exactly. It's that eternal clash, independence versus control. And honestly, I get both sides. Khalid wanted to lead his people. Britain wanted to protect their interests, mostly trade.
Trade, sure. But it's also that classic, we know better than you attitude. Empires always had that tone. Like, don't worry, we'll handle your future for you.
Yeah, they dressed it up as civilization, modernization, but let's be honest, it was control with better branding.
You know what's interesting, though? People forget that Britain didn't want chaos. They wanted stability, because instability meant losing money.
Yeah, that's why the Royal Navy was parked right there, just in case someone made the wrong move. They didn't want to fight, they wanted obedience.
Kind of sounds like modern bureaucracy.
Yeah, we don't want to fight you, we just want you to fill out the right forms.
Exactly. But when Khalid ignored the warnings, man, they were done talking.
Yeah, they sent the final message that said, leave the palace by 9 a.m. or we'll open fire.
And he said, okay, but no.
Pretty much. So 9:02 hits, boom, war begins.
38 minutes later, it's over. It's insane how fast that went down.
It's like the historical equivalent of, don't test me, and they proved they weren't bluffing.
But here's what people don't talk about. That war set the tone for how short conflicts would be managed later. You know, strike hard, end it fast, move on.
That's true. The British used it as an early example of what we now call shock and awe.
Exactly. It wasn't just about winning. It was about showing power so nobody else would even think about resisting.
It's the psychology of empire. Win the war before the next one even starts.
You scare your enemies into obedience without having to fight them later.
It's not moral, but it's effective.
Yeah, and that's something people today still don't get. You can talk about peace all day, but peace without power is just waiting to be broken.
Leans back, nodding. That's the conservative truth right there. Strength keeps peace. History shows it over and over again.
Exactly. You don't have to like war to understand that sometimes strength prevents worse wars.
And that's kind of what this story teaches. The world respects decisiveness. Whether it's right or wrong, hesitation always costs more.
You're right. Britain acted fast, maybe too fast, but it worked. The island stayed under their control, trade stayed open, and the region stayed quiet.
But there's also the other side, because in that silence, the local people didn't really have a say anymore.
True. That's the dark trade-off. Order comes with a price.
And that's why this story is so fascinating. It's not just about ships and cannons, it's about how fragile freedom is and how quickly it can vanish under order.
You know what that reminds me of? When governments today push for temporary control in the name of safety.
Oh yeah, history's full of those temporary things that never end.
Exactly. Just for your protection, they say, but somehow that protection never expires.
It's the same pattern. Power expands, and once it expands, it never really shrinks back down.
That's why I think studying these old wars matters. Not because we glorify them, but because we recognize the signs.
Absolutely. If you know what led to a 38-minute war, you can spot the same logic in modern conflicts, political, digital, or economic.
Yeah, history isn't just dusty facts, it's a mirror.
Smiles. Exactly. And the reflection isn't always pretty.
You know what I also love about this one? It shows how the smallest event can echo for generations.
Right. Zanzibar stayed under British influence until 1963, over 60 years later, all because of one morning in 1896.
That's nuts. Like, one short battle shaped an entire century of politics in East Africa.
Yeah, it's a reminder that quick doesn't mean small.
True. And honestly, the British Navy was something else. Those ships were basically the supercomputers of their time.
Oh, for sure. The HMS St. George, HMS Philomel, HMS Raccoon, they were all state-of-the-art, fast, heavily armed, precise.
And you got to respect that discipline. They coordinated everything down to the minute. This is why they were unstoppable.
That's why Britain ruled the seas for centuries. They didn't just have ships, they had systems, planning, timing, communication.
That's something modern life could learn from, honestly. People underestimate structure and discipline these days.
Yeah, everyone wants freedom, but nobody wants responsibility. The empire model had a lot of problems, sure, but discipline wasn't one of them.
Exactly. You can be critical of history and still respect what worked.
That's what's missing now, balance. People either romanticize history or cancel it. No middle ground.
Yeah. If a war happened today, half the internet would be arguing about who felt offended instead of what we learned from it.
Yeah, facts. Meanwhile, the cannonballs are already flying.
That's what makes this story so refreshing to talk about. It's not political, it's human. Pride, power, fear, decisions, that's universal.
Yeah, and honestly, the more you study history, the more you see that human nature doesn't really change. Technology does.
People still fight over power, pride, and ego, only now they do it on social media.
Yeah, digital wars instead of naval ones.
But the lesson's the same. Control the narrative, control the future.
And that's what Britain did perfectly that morning. They didn't just win a war, they wrote the story of it.
And we're still reading that story today.
Exactly. That's the power of being the one who keeps the pen.
That's why, even if it lasted 38 minutes, it still says more about empire, control, and human nature than most century-long wars ever could.
Well said.
You know, Joe, one thing that gets me about this whole Zanzibar story is how decisions made by a few people can ripple for decades.
Yeah, it's easy to think a war that lasted under an hour couldn't matter, but look at it. The British basically set the rules for the island for almost 70 years after.
And that's what conservative thought always circles back to, right? The idea that strong institutions and decisive action prevent chaos. Weakness just invites instability.
Exactly. People like Khalid acted on pride, Britain acted on strategy. Both were making choices in a vacuum, but one had the foresight and power to enforce theirs.
It's wild to think about the contrast. A tiny palace garrison against a fully armed navy. That disparity made the outcome inevitable, yet people still fought for principle.
And that principle? It wasn't wrong. Khalid wanted sovereignty for his people. That's honorable in its own way. The problem was, he didn't have the leverage.
And leverage matters. You can argue all day about moral right versus practical might, but history favors a side with resources and planning.
Absolutely. And that's why studying history like this is important. It's not just about who fired first, it's about understanding the calculus behind every move.
Speaking of calculus, the speed of the British Navy operation is fascinating. I mean, that coordinated ships, artillery, and troops down to the minute. That kind of discipline is, well, it's almost lost today.
Yeah, that's one thing you see in conservative philosophy too, the value of order and preparation. Freedom is great, but freedom without structure is chaos.
Right. And you can see it reflected in leadership. Khalid had courage, but he lacked the structure to back it up. Britain had structure, experience, and political support. The result was predictable.
Predictable, yes, but the human cost was still real. Hundreds injured, some killed, buildings destroyed, all in 38 minutes. It's a brutal efficiency.
And that's another lesson. Efficiency doesn't equal morality. It just equals results.
Exactly. And it also teaches you how reputations are built. The British Empire wasn't just projecting military power. They were projecting psychological power. They wanted everyone else to know resistance was costly.
That's something we overlook today. It wasn't enough to win a battle. You had to win the perception of dominance.
And perception shapes behavior far more than force alone. Khalid's failure became an object lesson not just for Zanzibar, but for neighboring regions.
Makes you realize, too, how fragile local governance can be when outside powers intervene. One misstep, one ignored warning, and the consequences can last generations.
And it's not just history. We see it in modern geopolitics as well. Countries, businesses, even individuals responding to power and perception more than principle at times, right?
And that's why people love studying these so-called small wars. They pack a disproportionate amount of lessons into a short period.
Yeah, it's not the size that matters, it's the message. A short war can speak louder than a drawn-out conflict if the stakes and execution are precise.
And here's the thing, most people think wars have to drag on to have impact. But Zanzibar proves the opposite. A well-timed, decisive action can change the political landscape for decades.
Exactly, and that's something conservative thinkers often point to, the importance of clarity and decisiveness in governance. Hesitation is expensive.
Which brings us back to leadership. Khalid was reactive, emotional, and principled, but Britain was proactive, calculated, and relentless. The contrast couldn't be starker.
And it also shows the moral complexity. You can respect Khalid's courage without agreeing with his strategy, and you can acknowledge Britain's efficiency without condoning imperialism.
That's history in a nutshell, isn't it? Not black or white, just cause and effect, choice and consequence.
Absolutely, and that's why moments like this are so compelling. A single morning in 1896 teaches you about courage, control, power, and consequence.
And pride, too. Never underestimate pride as a motivating factor. Khalid's ego and sense of duty drove him, even against impossible odds.
And sometimes pride leads to disaster, sometimes it inspires change. It's on how the forces around it respond.
Right. And the British response wasn't just brute force. It was psychological, intimidation, projection, and timing. That's what made the 38 minutes effective.
And that's something modern leaders could learn from. Strategy is not just about strength, it's about the timing, the message, and the audience.
Yeah, and it also makes you think about the people caught in between. The locals, the merchants, the families, who had no voice but paid the price.
And their lives continued afterward under a new regime, a reminder that power changes hands, but consequences linger.
That's why history isn't just stories about rulers and empires. It's about the everyday lives that are shaped by decisions far above them.
Exactly. And even though the Anglo-Zanzibar War lasted barely an hour, its effects resonated for generations.
Makes you wonder how many small events today are shaping tomorrow without us noticing.
Too many, I'd bet. And that's the power of history. It trains your eyes to see cause and effect, even when it's subtle.
Yeah, and This story, with all its brevity and intensity, is a perfect example. It's a war that's over before lunch, but it teaches lessons that last a lifetime.
And that's why we keep talking about it. It's easy to forget, but even the smallest events can ripple through time in ways you never imagine.
And when you connect those lessons to modern life, leadership, and society, it becomes more than just history. It becomes a guide.
Exactly. That's the beauty of studying moments like this. They're compact, intense, and full of insight if you look closely.
So 38 minutes wasn't just a war, it was a concentrated lesson in power, decision-making, and human behavior.
And that's why it's still relevant today. We can laugh at the absurdity, respect the courage, and analyze the strategy all at the same time.
I think that's why these discussions resonate. It's history, yes, but it's also human nature in action.
And human nature hasn't changed much. We just have different tools now.
True. Same motives, same struggles, just different arenas.
And that's the lesson we carry forward. The more you study history, the more prepared you are to understand the present.
And maybe, just maybe, avoid making the same mistakes in 38 minutes or less.
Exactly.
You know, Joe, one thing I keep thinking about is how much logistics matter in conflicts. 38 minutes doesn't just happen by accident.
Exactly. It's planning, timing, and understanding your resources. Britain had ships, artillery, train crews, and a plan. Khalid had hope, mostly.
Hope only goes so far, and that's a lesson not just for war, for business, government, even personal decisions. You need preparation, or luck won't save you.
Right. And history is full of examples where preparation mattered more than numbers. You can have 3,000 people, but if they're poorly trained and poorly equipped, it doesn't matter.
And that applies today too. Look at how some organizations collapse under minor crises because they didn't anticipate the problem.
Exactly. Planning is underrated. People think courage will carry the day, but courage without structure is often wasted energy.
Another thing I noticed is the signaling. Britain didn't just attack, they gave warnings, deadlines, ultimatums. That's Strategy 101.
It's psychological warfare, plain and simple. They wanted everyone watching to know the cost of defiance. And it worked.
It also speaks to reputation. Once you establish that you act decisively, others are less likely to test you. That's a lesson leaders could use more often.
Absolutely. Reputation is a force multiplier. One well-executed action can influence behavior far beyond the immediate event.
And it's not always about brutality. It's about credibility. Khalid ignored the warnings, and that made his downfall inevitable.
Right. It's the difference between acting impulsively and acting predictably but strategically.
Another thing, look at the economic angle. Zanzibar wasn't some random island. It was a hub for trade and spices, ivory, and more. That's why Britain cared so much.
Exactly. Control the trade and you control influence. Power isn't just military, it's economic too.
And that's a lesson for today. Nations, companies, even individuals. Influence comes from controlling resources, information, or opportunities.
And timing matters there too. Britain struck at the moment of transition right after the Sultan died. That's when leverage was weakest and opportunity was strongest.
Opportunism with preparation. That's a powerful combo.
And it's also a lesson in patience. They didn't just storm the palace immediately. They waited for the right moment, gave ultimatums, and ensured their case was ironclad.
Right. There's a conservative principle in there too. Careful, deliberate action. Don't rush, but be ready.
Exactly. And history teaches that those who act decisively at the right time often shape the world for decades.
Another thing that struck me is the optics. The British made sure the world knew how fast they acted. It wasn't secretive. They wanted recognition.
That's important. Influence isn't just power, it's perceived power. You can control an island, a company, or even public opinion, but if nobody notices, it doesn't matter.
So true, and Khalid's failure wasn't just military. It was symbolic. The speed and efficiency of Britain's response made a statement that echoed across the region.
And that's why studying these events is useful beyond history. It teaches lessons in leadership, psychology, and strategy.
And discipline. Let's not forget discipline. The British Navy operated like clockwork. Every man knew their role. No chaos, no hesitation.
Discipline is underrated. People talk about courage, ingenuity, or luck, but without discipline, those traits are limited.
That applies in politics, business, even day-to-day life. The more organized and disciplined you are, the more influence you can project.
And there's another conservative insight here. Consequences matter. Britain made clear there were consequences for disobedience. They enforced them swiftly.
Right. Swift consequences create predictability. People know the rules and the costs, which keeps systems stable.
Exactly. And that's why Khalid's gamble failed. He ignored both warnings and consequences, thinking pride alone could protect him.
And it didn't. There's a practical lesson there. Principle is important, but you have to respect reality.
And reality is shaped by power, timing, and resources. Knowing the landscape matters more than moral certainty.
And yet courage still deserves respect. Khalid acted on what he believed was right. That's human nature. People resist control, even when they know the odds are against them.
True. History isn't about condemning courage or celebrating force blindly. It's about learning how choices, preparation, and context intersect.
And that's why the Anglo-Zanzibar War, brief as it was, is a perfect case study. Lessons in strategy, leadership, economics, and human nature, all packed into 38 minutes.
It's like a compressed seminar in power dynamics. Quick, brutal, and unforgettable.
And if people study it carefully, they see patterns that repeat everywhere, from politics to business to personal decisions.
Absolutely. Timing, preparation, reputation, consequence. The fundamentals never change.
And that's why talking about history isn't just about the past. It's about giving context for today and tomorrow.
And teaching people to think ahead, to anticipate outcomes, understand leverage, and act decisively when it counts.
Right, and to respect both courage and consequence, even when they collide.
That's the balance, and it's what makes this story timeless.
So short, yet packed with lessons. And that's why it's one of my favorite examples of history teaching us strategy and human nature.
Exactly. It's a perfect reminder that sometimes the smallest events carry the biggest lessons.
And in 38 minutes, we see courage, failure, strategy, discipline, and consequence all at once. That's a lot to digest.
But that's the point. History isn't just dates and names, it's cause and effect, decisions and outcomes, and understanding those helps you navigate life today.
And the story of Zanzibar proves you don't need a long war to learn a lifetime of lessons.
You just need someone willing to pay attention.
That's right.
You know, Mike, one thing that always strikes me is how the locals must have felt. Imagine waking up to cannon fire and a palace on fire, and by lunchtime, you've got a whole new ruler.
Yeah, talk about a change management plan nobody asked for.
Exactly. No vote, no discussion, just here's your new sultan, deal with it.
I bet someone was like, well, that escalated quickly.
And that's the reality of power. Decisions made in offices or aboard ships can cascade into real lives instantly.
And it's not just history. Think about modern politics. One policy, one law, one executive decision. It changes millions of lives overnight.
Right. And that's why studying these moments is so valuable. You see the human impact behind every action, not just the headlines.
Plus, it gives you a healthy respect for people in charge. Running a country isn't a video game. Mistakes have real consequences.
And sometimes speed and decisiveness beat morality or consensus. Britain showed that. Khalid showed what happens when you rely solely on principle.
Brutal but effective.
And it's also about leverage. Khalid had the palace and a few thousand men, but Britain had leverage in every sense: naval power, political backing, and global perception.
Yeah, it's like bringing a butter knife to a gunfight and being surprised when things go sideways.
Exactly. And leverage isn't just weapons, it's alliances, economy, communication, all the pieces that make a decision stick.
And that ties back to leadership. The guy who understands leverage, timing, and consequence, that's the guy history remembers.
And the one who ignores it, even for good reasons, becomes a cautionary tale.
Poor Khalid, brave, stubborn, unlucky, basically every underdog story rolled into 38 minutes.
Yeah, but his story teaches strategy, psychology, and human nature all at once.
You know what else is fascinating? The psychology of the British sailors. They knew they had overwhelming power, but they still trained, drilled, and coordinated down to the minute.
Discipline over raw force every time. Even with superior firepower, chaos can ruin an operation if people aren't prepared.
Makes you think about modern talent versus structure debates. Talent alone doesn't win without process.
Exactly. And the Anglo-Zanzibar War is a microcosm of that. Every step was planned, nothing left to chance.
And they timed it perfectly. Imagine being on the palace walls thinking you got an hour, and 2 minutes later, kaboom!
Yeah, and that 2-minute window shows the value of punctuality. History rewards the precise.
And punishes the late.
But beyond discipline, there's the lesson about perception. The British didn't just want to win. They wanted the world to see it.
Reputation as a weapon. I like that.
And it works. Everyone around Zanzibar knew the cost of defiance immediately. The lesson lasted decades without another battle.
Shortest war ever, longest lesson.
And it's still teaching us today, if you pay attention.
Another lesson is about timing. Britain didn't strike immediately after the Sultan died. They waited until they could act decisively, with minimal risk.
Yeah, patience, preparation, and precision. A strategy for success in almost anything.
And probably a good way to avoid embarrassing headlines. Failed war attempt doesn't look good in history books.
Right. And there's also the economic angle. Zanzibar was valuable. Britain wasn't just flexing military muscle, they were protecting trade and influence.
Control the commerce, control the region. Still relevant today.
Absolutely. And the speed of execution mattered as much as the force. You hit decisively, and the signal spreads instantly.
It's like a chess game, but you got cannons and gunboats instead of pawns and rooks.
And a tight deadline. You don't get to move slowly when the world is watching.
And yet the human side is still there. Hundreds injured, some killed. People's lives changed in an instant.
That's the harsh reality. Efficiency doesn't erase tragedy.
Efficiency doesn't erase responsibility either.
And that's why history is such a rich teacher. It forces you to look at multiple layers: strategy, power, human cost.
And humor, if you're willing to see it. 38 minutes. You almost have to laugh at the absurdity.
Yeah, like a sitcom condensed into a historical event.
But with real consequences.
And that's the balance. History teaches lessons, but it's grounded in reality. Triumph and tragedy coexist.
And sometimes the smallest events echo the longest.
Which is why we keep talking about it. A short war, 38 minutes, but decades of influence. That's the power of decisive action.
And the value of paying attention to details. Deadlines, leverage, perception. Little things make huge differences.
And understanding those differences helps you read not just history, but human nature today.
And maybe avoid repeating the same mistakes, too.
Exactly. Every decision has consequences. Some faster, some slower. But I'll leave a mark.
Even in 38 minutes.
Even in 38 minutes.
You know what always fascinates me about the aftermath? How quickly Zanzibar had to adjust. The palace was gone, a new sultan in place, and life just had to go on.
Yeah. Breakfast 1 minute, new ruler the next. Imagine explaining that to your kids. By the way, that cannon fire, that was your new government.
And yet, somehow, markets reopened, trade continued, people kept living. Humans are resilient in ways we often underestimate.
Yeah, but that resilience doesn't erase the trauma. Families lost homes, workers lost livelihoods, and yet the story barely made the history books outside of Britain.
Exactly, and that's the part people miss. History isn't just what leaders do, it's what ordinary people endure.
And they endured a lot. The palace was destroyed, the harbor damaged, ships sunk. That's a lot to rebuild, even with British help.
Right. And the reconstruction wasn't just about buildings. It was about reestablishing control, trade routes, and authority. That's where governance lessons come in.
So the lesson is, if someone else has the bigger stick, they write the rules and everyone else adapts.
Yeah, harsh but true. And the British used that power to install a system that suited them. Pro-British Sultan, aligned trade, and enforced treaties.
And that echoes a lot in modern governance, too. You can have elections, but external influence, resources, and leverage often shape the outcome more than ballots.
Exactly. It's not cynicism, it's realism. Power flows to those who understand the system and act decisively within it.
And lesson number 2, sometimes resistance looks noble, but it's also expensive. Khalid's gamble cost lives and infrastructure.
And it's a reminder that leadership is responsibility. Pride alone doesn't protect your people. Strategy does.
And maybe a little humility.
Definitely humility. And thinking beyond yourself. The ripple effects of decisions can last decades.
Like Zanzibar staying under British influence until 1963. One morning in 1896 shaped 60-plus years of politics.
That's a powerful lesson. Small events can have huge consequences. Timing, leverage, and foresight matter more than force alone.
Yep. And it also shows the value of continuity in governance. A sudden shift, even a short war, can destabilize society if there's no plan for transition.
And that's why history teaches us to study institutions, not just battles. Strong structures can absorb shocks. Weak ones crumble.
And the British were masters of that. Their empire had layers: military, economic, administrative. They didn't rely on one thing to maintain control.
Exactly. Redundancy and planning, the foundations of stability. Even if you dislike empires, the systems they built were effective.
Yeah, you can admire the method without cheering the cause.
Precisely. And there's a lesson there for modern leaders. Organize, plan, and enforce rules consistently. Chaos loves gaps in authority.
And the people of Zanzibar learned that quickly. Obedience, adaptation, and resilience became survival skills.
And culture, too. Life continued. Markets, schools, daily routines. The human spirit adapts remarkably, even under new rulers.
And humor helps. I'd imagine someone in the market joked about the fastest regime change ever.
Probably. Humor is one way people cope with upheaval. Makes the absurdity bearable.
And it's also a lesson for us. Even in dire situations, perspective matters. Observing, learning, adapting.
Exactly. And history like this teaches observation. Notice the timing, the leverage, the consequences. That's the essence of strategy.
And maybe the next time you have a dispute over parking, you think twice before escalating.
True. Micro lessons in human behavior everywhere.
And at a larger scale, Zanzibar shows how strategic dominance can shape a region. It wasn't just an island. It sent a message across East Africa.
Yes, a signal to neighboring sultanates and colonies: defiance has a cost, obedience has rewards.
And that's politics in a nutshell. Rewards, risks, and perception.
And it's timeless. That dynamic repeats in organizations, governments, and societies everywhere.
And irony? 38 minutes, but echoes lasting decades.
Sometimes the briefest moments are the loudest.
And studying them teaches patience, strategy, and respect for consequences.
And that's why we keep coming back to these stories. They're not just history, they're lessons in leadership, human behavior, and decision-making.
And they make for great conversation.
Definitely.
And so to take away, preparation, leverage, timing, and discipline. And remember the human cost.
Exactly. That's the balance every leader has to consider.
Even if it's just 38 minutes.
Even if it's just 38 minutes. You know, Mike, Zanzibar is interesting, but it's also a window into how the British Empire operated across Africa.
Yeah, one island, 38 minutes, and the message spread across continents. That's efficiency.
Exactly. And it wasn't just Zanzibar. Think about Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt. Different contexts, same principle. Show strength, control trade, and manage leadership transitions.
It's a pattern. Strategic interventions, minimal resistance at maximum leverage.
And timing was key. Britain always struck when local politics were weakest or transitions left gaps.
Basically, empire's version of catching while you're vulnerable.
Pretty much. And it worked repeatedly. That's why their influence lasted so long.
And it also shows the value of understanding local politics before acting. They didn't just bomb first, ask questions later.
Right. They had intelligence, advisors, treaties, networks, all prepared long before the cannon fire.
And the lesson for today? Know your environment, your resources, and the consequences before making a move.
Exactly. Whether it's a business deal, a negotiation, or a government decision, preparation multiplies your effectiveness.
And sometimes a little show of power goes a long way. You don't need a marathon conflict to make a point.
Reputation, leverage, and decisiveness.
Those three together are powerful.
And slightly terrifying if you're on the other side.
History teaches fear as a tool, not cruelty necessarily, but clarity. People understand the cost of defiance quickly.
And it also teaches restraint. Britain didn't destroy the entire island. They focused on the palace, key defenses, and the leadership structure. Strategic precision.
Exactly. No unnecessary destruction, just enough to achieve objectives and send a message.
That's a lesson for today, too. Efficiency beats chaos every time.
And it reinforces conservative principles, measured, disciplined action, clear consequences, respect for structure.
And yet, human nature is always part of the equation. Pride, ego, ambition. Khalid had all of them.
And that's why he lost. Structure, discipline, and leverage beat unchecked ambition.
So, the bigger lesson, don't ignore reality, even for principle. Know your limits.
Exactly. And the British Empire, for all its flaws, understood limits, timing, and leverage better than most.
And they documented it all. Dates, times, casualties, flags down. Imagine the reports back home.
Yeah, 38 minutes later, success. Very precise, very British.
And they probably had tea afterward, like nothing happened.
Probably. And that precision and calm reinforced their image. Disciplined, unshakable, reliable.
And influence spreads faster when people believe you can act decisively. Fear, respect, or both.
And in Zanzibar, they had both. Immediate obedience, minimal further conflict, and decades of quiet dominance.
And then the local people adapted. Businesses reopened, markets functioned, life went on. Humans are remarkably resilient.
True. And yet the lesson remains, freedom and agency are fragile if they collide with superior force.
And that's timeless. Not just history, but politics, business, even personal dynamics.
Exactly. Leverage and timing shape outcomes more than numbers or pride.
And being prepared, that multiplies leverage exponentially.
And that's why we study these moments. They're compressed lessons in strategy, human nature, and governance.
And with a touch of absurdity, 38 minutes, but lessons for generations.
And a story worth retelling.
And one you can't forget once you see all the layers: strategy, psychology, economy, human behavior.
Exactly. It's history condensed, showing cause and effect like a masterclass in decision-making.
And subtle humor along the way. Humans can't help it.
True. Even history needs a little levity to stay digestible.
So, global context, conservative principles, human behavior, discipline, preparation, all wrapped up in a single island incident.
That's the beauty of studying these moments. They're small in time, huge in insight.
And still relevant. Power, influence, preparation, lessons we can apply today.
History isn't just a story. It's a guide. You just have to read it carefully.
And maybe chuckle at the absurd parts, too.
Definitely.
You know, Mike, reading about Zanzibar, it's easy to see the parallels with today. Not wars with cannons, but decisions, influence, and leadership.
Yeah, history isn't just dusty books. It's human behavior and fast forward. Decisions, stakes, and consequences, all compressed.
Exactly. The lesson? Leaders who act decisively, understand leverage, and plan ahead often succeed, even if the world doesn't notice immediately.
And procrastination? Ask the enemy. Delay and the consequences hit harder than any cannon.
True. Hesitation can be costly, and that's a conservative principle at its core. Strength and responsibility go hand in hand.
So basically, don't ignore problems, don't overreact, but act with authority and timing.
Exactly. And people today forget that strength doesn't mean cruelty. It means readiness, discipline, and clarity.
And subtle humor helps too. Even generals probably laughed at how absurd some situations were.
Definitely. Perspective keeps you grounded. And in modern life, it's the same. You can face high-stakes decisions without losing your mind.
And risk assessment, that's key. Khalid gambled, Britain calculated. One loss, one won. Lesson learned.
And it's not just politics. Business, personal life, even social influence. Understanding leverage and timing matters.
And sometimes people fight for principle, not realizing the practical cost. Brave, but expensive.
And that's the nuance. Courage is admirable, but strategy ensures it's effective.
And preparation multiplies courage. An unprepared hero rarely succeeds.
Exactly. And looking at Zanzibar, you see preparation at multiple levels: intelligence, resources, timing, and discipline.
Man, communication. British orders were clear. Leave by 9 a.m. Consequences stated plainly. No ambiguity.
Clear expectations, enforceable consequences, a leadership lesson still valid today.
And the locals? They had to adapt. Flexibility in the face of change is underrated.
Humans are remarkably adaptable. Even in the chaos of war, society recalibrates. Markets, trade, daily life, life finds a way.
And humor helps. A little levity during upheaval keeps perspective.
Definitely. Even history's most serious events have absurd angles. 38 minutes. That's absurd by any standard.
And yet, the lesson lasts decades. That's the power of efficiency and decisiveness.
And leadership. Being able to make tough calls quickly while considering consequences. That's timeless.
And restraint. Britain didn't burn the entire island, just enough to achieve their goal. Precision, not chaos.
And that's something modern leaders often overlook. Overreaction creates unnecessary problems. Controlled, strategic action works better.
And perception. Showing decisiveness without needless cruelty. That shapes reputation.
Reputation is power. Once people see that you act decisively, leverage increases without constant effort.
And sometimes a short action speaks louder than years of negotiation.
Exactly. 38 minutes, yet decades of influence.
And that's why studying history is practical. Lessons in power, strategy, psychology, and human behavior.
And from a conservative perspective, it reinforces that strength, preparation, discipline, and responsibility matter.
And humor helps you survive it all.
Definitely. Balance is key. Strength without humanity is tyranny. Humanity without strength is vulnerability.
And timing, knowing when to act and when to wait.
Exactly. Every decision carries risk. Every delay costs opportunity. Every action shapes perception.
And even a small event, 38 minutes in this case, can echo for generations.
That's the core of leadership and strategy. Small, decisive, well-planned actions often have the biggest impact.
And subtle humor keeps the lessons digestible.
Absolutely. History teaches, guides, and reminds us to act wisely, efficiently, and decisively.
And maybe chuckle at the absurd parts along the way.
Definitely. Even history needs a little levity.
So whether it's Zanzibar, business, or government today, preparation, leverage, timing, and discipline still win.
And understanding consequences, human, political, and economic, is essential.
Even if it only takes 38 minutes.
Even if it only takes 38 minutes. You know, Mike, one of the things that really sticks with me about Zanzibar is how the smallest action can ripple across history.
Yeah, 38 minutes and decades of consequences. That's wow.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Zanzibar. It set a tone for other colonial interactions in Africa. Quick, decisive, and unmistakably clear about who was in charge.
Like a historical mic drop. We came, we saw, we reorganized your leadership.
Pretty much. And it shows the power of perception. People didn't have to fight again. They'd already seen the cost of defiance.
And that's a lesson in leadership. Your reputation precedes you. Actions echo longer than words.
Exactly. And in today's world, it's the same. Whether it's politics, business, or personal influence, decisive action builds credibility.
And hesitation, that just invites challenges.
And history teaches that. Hesitation can be more costly than mistakes.
So, conservative principle number 1, strength and clarity prevent bigger problems later.
Absolutely. And principle 2, preparation multiplies strength. You can't act decisively without knowing your terrain, your resources, and the risks.
And maybe factor in a little humor. Keeps you sane when cannonballs are flying.
Definitely. Perspective matters. Even in extreme situations, a sense of humor can guide clearer thinking.
And the local people, their resilience is remarkable. They adapted, rebuilt, and carried on.
Exactly. And that's human nature. We endure, we adapt, and we learn. The lessons of the strong are amplified when they intersect with the resilience of the people.
And history like this reminds us that leadership isn't just about authority. It's about foresight and responsibility.
And that's why studying small events matters. Zanzibar was brief, but the principles are universal. Leverage, timing, preparation, discipline, and awareness of consequences.
And maybe keeping tea ready, just in case.
Can't underestimate British efficiency.
But seriously, the story shows that decisions made in minutes can shape lives for decades.
And that's timeless. Whether it's an empire or a modern government, fast, informed, and decisive action wins the day.
And it's not about glorifying force. It's about understanding the stakes, the people involved, and the potential consequences.
Exactly. Strength without wisdom is reckless. Wisdom without strength is ineffective. The balance is key.
And subtle humor keeps us grounded while we process the chaos of history.
Absolutely. Life is serious, but a little levity helps you see the lessons more clearly.
And when you look at Zanzibar, you realize history isn't just battles or treaties. It's about people, decisions, and outcomes interacting in real time.
And those interactions are what shape culture, politics, and even economies for generations.
So the takeaway: preparation, discipline, decisiveness, understanding consequences, and resilience.
And maybe a bit of humor along the way.
Definitely.
And that's why stories like Zanzibar endure, not for the destruction, but for the lessons, leadership, human nature, and the power of swift, thoughtful action.
And it reminds us that history doesn't need hours to teach a lesson. Sometimes 38 minutes is enough.
And the echoes last far longer than the minutes themselves.
Lessons, legacy, and a little absurdity. Zanzibar has it all.
Exactly, and that's why we keep looking back, to understand, to learn, and maybe to laugh a little along the way.
And to remember that even in brief moments, human decisions matter.
Absolutely. Time may be short, but the impact is lasting.
38 minutes and the world learned something about power, strategy, and human nature.
And we're still learning from it today.
That's the beauty of history.
The lessons endure long after the cannon's smoke clears.
And maybe that's why we enjoy talking about it. Wisdom, humor, and reflection all rolled into one.
Exactly, and that's a story worth remembering.
You know, Mike, thinking about Zanzibar one last time, it's really about perspective. One morning, chaos. By the afternoon, new leadership. And centuries later, we're still dissecting it.
Yeah, history compresses everything. 38 minutes, and yet so many lessons packed in there.
And the bigger takeaway: decisions matter, timing matters, preparation matters, and consequences echo long after the moment passes.
And sometimes humor helps you survive both the cannon fire and the paperwork.
Definitely. Perspective keeps clarity.
And from a conservative standpoint, there's a clear message. Strength, discipline, foresight, and responsibility work. They prevent bigger problems and maintain order.
Right. It's not about aggression for the sake of aggression. It's about decisive, informed action that preserves stability.
And knowing your environment. The British didn't act blindly. They understood the politics, the people, and the risks.
Exactly. Strategy without understanding is just luck. Understanding without action is wasted.
And leadership, it's about balancing courage, wisdom, and timing. Too much of one without the others, disaster.
And that's why College Gamble failed. Ambition alone can't stand against preparation, discipline, and leverage.
And maybe a touch of humor to keep your wits about you.
Definitely. Even in history's gravest moments, perspective matters.
And the people who lived through it, they adapted, rebuilt, and endured. Humanity is resilient, even under swift and harsh changes.
And that's another lesson. Strength should protect, not just dominate. Leadership carries responsibility for those impacted.
And yet, the story is almost absurd. 38 minutes, but it teaches about centuries of governance, strategy, and human behavior.
Absolutely. The brevity makes it memorable. The lessons, timeless.
And as conservatives, it reinforces what we value: preparedness, measured action, accountability, and clear consequences.
And applying that today, whether in politics, business, or personal decisions, the principles remain the same. Think ahead, act decisively, understand your leverage, and always consider the consequences.
And maybe keep some tea ready, just in case.
Can't underestimate that.
But really, it's about perspective and learning from history. Even a short, seemingly obscure event can teach more than years of reading.
Exactly. And it reminds us strength, wisdom, timing, and resilience are interconnected. Neglect one, and the whole system falters.
And subtle humor keeps it digestible while we digest the gravity.
Absolutely. Even history's lessons need a human touch to resonate.
So when people hear the shortest war in history, they laugh at 38 minutes. But if they dig deeper, they find decades of strategy, leadership, and consequence.
And that's the story we remember. Not just the time, but the impact. Not just the destruction, but the decisions behind it.
And the subtle absurdity that makes history human.
Exactly. Lessons, laughter, reflection, that's what history gives us.
And maybe a little inspiration for today. Be prepared, act wisely, and understand the ripple of your actions.
That's Zanzibar in a nutshell. 38 minutes that teach centuries of insight.
And we're still talking about it over a century later. That's the power of history.
Absolutely, and that's why we keep studying it, learning from it, and passing it on.
Lessons that matter, even if you weren't there.
And that's a story worth remembering.
Zanzibar, 38 minutes, but a lifetime of lessons.
Exactly. Well, Mike, I think that wraps up the story of Zanzibar. 38 minutes of chaos, a lifetime of lessons.
Yeah, who knew history could be so short, yet so dense? 38 minutes, less than a lunch break, and it shaped decades.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. It's a reminder that even the smallest moments can have huge consequences. Decisions, timing, leverage, they matter more than we often realize.
And the absurdity of it all. A palace falling in under an hour, ships firing cannons, and the British just calmly installing their preferred sultan afterward. Classic history.
Definitely. But beyond the humor, there's a lot to take away. Leadership isn't just about authority, it's about preparation, discipline, and understanding the ripple effect of your actions.
And resilience, too. The people living through it adapted, rebuilt, and carried on. Humanity's ability to endure, even under sudden upheaval, is remarkable.
And for our listeners, that's a lesson worth remembering. Whether you're making decisions in business, government, or your personal life, the principles are timeless. Know your environment, act decisively, understand leverage, and anticipate consequences.
And maybe keep the sense of humor along the way. It helps when the world seems chaotic.
Absolutely. Perspective keeps you grounded, even in the most extreme situations. And history, bizarre, brutal, or brief, gives us that perspective.
And it's why we keep revisiting these stories on Avenue 26. Not just for the weird or shocking moments, but for the lessons, the strategy, and the human behavior that still matters today.
Right. History isn't just a collection of events. It's a guide, a way to understand people, power, and the outcomes of decisions. Zanzibar may have lasted 38 minutes, but its story continues to teach us.
And it gives us a chance to laugh a little too, because some parts of history are just that absurd.
Exactly. And that's what makes Avenue 26 what it is, taking history, culture, and human stories and exploring them in a way that's thoughtful, engaging, and yes, sometimes humorous.
So if there's one takeaway from today's episode, small events can have huge impacts. Preparation and decisiveness matter, and history is always worth studying, even if it's bizarre.
And maybe most importantly, remember that behind every event, there are people reacting, adapting, and shaping the course of history.
That's the human side of history. And that's why we'll keep bringing you these stories on Avenue 26.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope today's story made you think, maybe laugh a little, and gave you some perspective on power, leadership, and the unexpected ways history unfolds.
And if nothing else, remember, 38 minutes can change everything.
And that's the beauty of history. See you next time on Avenue 26.
where stories live, lessons last, and perspective matters.